I want you.
Dum dum dum. All right.
Show me the way.
3, 2, 1. Hey Douglas, how are you?
I don't even know how I feel anymore, man. Who are you?
I have
Where are
not.
we? What are we doing?
What planet is this? How's it going, man? I have not seen you literally in person for I think 3 weeks. And just so listeners understand this, we work in the same office.
Yeah, in theory. Yeah, I think Ian and I, our fearless leader, were having a conversation yesterday where we're like, pretty sure neither of us know exactly what city Daniel's in right now, but it'd be really rude to ask on the back end of like a 2-week stretch. So things have been going swimmingly while you've been away.
Oh, good. Glad to know that.
It's we've devolved into 2 clans. Each has its own color and its own god, and we just fight for the Wi-Fi each day.
Which god is the many-faced god? Because that's the one that I want to align myself with.
Well, neither group really washes that much.
Oh, that's too bad.
So I think the many-faced god is sitting this one out.
All right.
But as we all know, the many-faced god plays a role.
Yes.
Hashtag
not seen,
spoilers.
not heard.
I felt.
So, yeah, I was in San Francisco for Microsoft Build. Then I came back. Then I went to New York for LG. Sorry, no, I was in New York for LG. Then I went to Build. Then I came back for a few days. Then I went to New York again for Asus, the Zenfone 2, which we'll talk about later. And then I just got back yesterday from Ottawa, where I received an award for something. I can't really understand what.
Do you happen to have the award on hand that you could show to our faithful?
I can. This was not rehearsed.
This is not planned.
This is my national Daniel Bader Award for Innovation for Excellence in Science and Technology Reporting. So the CATA Alliance, which is a trade publication / organization, they awarded this to me, and I'm very honored and sort of perplexed. But it was a really nice evening. I attended with my mom, which was very cool, and we all schmoozed, and I got to meet John Ruffalo, who you have been following very closely, because he also won an award for technology innovation from an executive
for investing in like every successful Canadian company that exists right now.
So yeah, give us a little bit of before we dive into the pod, let's give a bit of a shout out / overview of John Ruffalo.
Yeah, so he is the dude at Omer's Ventures, which is the I guess prestigious venture capital arm in Canada. They've invested in like companies. I'm gonna miss some, but just like name any. If you are a non-startup-y person and just kind of know Canadian tech companies, they probably invested in them. I'm thinking like Hootsuite, Shopify. Shopify being the big one, just because they IPO'd this week for a junk ton of money and are now worth just under $2 billion US. He's also someone that we've interviewed on BNN's The Disruptors, the TV show that BetaKit, the kit, is associated with. And I think he's been the most Canadian US-styled VC in the capacity to take big swings on successful companies and really push forward a mandate of success and like trying to build global Canadian companies rather than funding towards acquisitions or exits. If that makes sense. So yeah, he's a cool dude, very candid. for everything I've known, like really just polite and engaging, really really cool. Like what was it, in person? What was that like?
He was very approachable. I didn't get to speak with him very long because he had just got off a plane from New York
Mm-hmm.
after the New York Stock Exchange, because the Shopify debuted on the NYSE and the TSX or the TMX, which I guess is it TSX these days.
It's the TSX, but TMX runs it.
Right. Okay.
TMX,
So
yeah.
it debuted there. It raised. What did it? It got 60% boost in New York and 90% boost in Toronto. Or am I conflating the two? I can't remember.
No, we reported. I think it was like their high was like 66 in the New York Stock Exchange, and like I think 56 on the TSX. That I think that quieted by the end of day of trading.
Oh yeah, okay.
But by end of day, they were worth 1.9 billion US dollars. After selling their shares, selling 7.7 million shares at $17, which was higher than their, I think they were going for 12 and 14, and then the report was 14 to 16, and then it was 17. So they made a healthy chunk of change off the sell of shares to the underwriters, and then the underwriters made a healthy chunk of change off the stock exploding.
So it seems like there's a little bit of a sort of an inside baseball type of thing here, where a lot of people knew it was happening. A lot of the registered investors bought up most of those shares, those outstanding shares, and then sold them to, I guess, regular investors on day one, right, for a bit of a profit.
Yeah, that's the kind of the basic process of IPO as I understand it, and we're actually working with the wonderful gentlemen and ladies at the TMX to do kind of a feature on BetaKit to really explain, because this is, you guys know me, I like talking about phones, I like talking about things that happened in the 90s. I don't know anything about finance, my God.
Yeah.
So they've been helping us out, but the basic process is I think the Shopify IPO is a really good example of kind of a very typical well-run IPO in terms of the process, where it's a company that's growing quite a bit, very successful, intentionally not profitable, to not only fuel the growth, but then when they kick in profitability, they can demonstrate value to shareholders. They kind of undersell where they're going to be to drive up demand right before the IPO, so that when those shares are sold, everyone can make their money. So it is a very kind of what did you call it? Inside baseball. The whole process is one of affectation so that everyone can make cash off of it. And then for the Mobile Syrup kind of crew listening, the last IPO that they're all probably generally aware of would have been Facebook's, which did not go as easily as this did. Now, obviously,
Twitter as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think
Twitter was later. Twitter went better than
yes.
Facebook's. That's
yes.
From what I understand. So just to give you sort of a background, a little bit. I mean, before we move on, OMERS is not just a private equity company. They own major investments in. Let me just list a couple. Microsoft, Talisman Energy. They own 3.5 million Microsoft shares.
Mm-hmm.
They own a bunch. They own Tesco, like $80 million worth of Tesco, which is a big UK-based grocery chain. General Motors, they own 1.7 million shares. Barclays, another big bank in the UK, they own a chunk of Life Labs. Have you ever gotten your blood taken in Canada? Like they have a very wide range of investments. So it's not just the private equity arm of the company that does good things, but I digress. So let's sort of keep on that topic. Moving on to sort of the CRTC carrier relationship, and starting on June
you were in
3rd,
Ottawa. Did you smooth with any CRTC people at the the milestones?
Yeah.
Right on Rideau and what is it, Albert?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Where they love to go. It's right by
I didn't. I believe the CRTC's main offices, aren't they in Gatineau? Or am I just completely off there?
Just over the bridge, man.
I should probably know that. Anyway, recently the carriers lost a federal appeal court bid to stay the June 3rd deadline for the Wireless Code of Conduct's application across all of Canadians, regardless of where they are in their contract. So basically what happens on June 3rd is that if you signed a 3-year contract between June 3rd of 2012 and I believe June of 2013, which is when the carriers started coming out with their 2-year contracts, you will automatically be able to leave your contract without paying a cancellation fee. So it's not banning 3-year contracts. What the Wireless Code of Conduct mandates is that you have to be able to pay off your phone within 2 years. Mm-hmm. So even if you haven't paid off your phone as of June 3rd, because you signed a 3-year contract before the application of these 2-year contracts, you are still going to be allowed legally to leave your contract without paying a penalty, which allows, so what a lot of the industry analysts are calling a double cohort. It's allowing people to look around, see if there's better priced plans out there, better options, and
it's kind of just a mulligan.
Yeah, take stock of the industry as it stands today, which is a very different industry, both from a customer service and pricing perspective, as it was 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we've gotten a lot of questions about this. A lot of people very curious about how they can use this to their advantage. Now, there are a few things to take note of here. First, most plans today are not cheaper than they were 3 years ago. Like, that is just a given. But what you get in your plan is more stuff. So you're getting a bigger bundle of stuff along with that higher price.
Yes.
That being
said, if you have any interest in stuff,
a lot of it isn't interesting because a lot of it is voice and texting, right?
Yes.
Or with companies like Rogers and Fido, you get free Show Me for 2 years, or you get a year of NHL Game Center Live if you sign up for their Share Everything plan. Or on Fido, if you sign up for one of their Pulse plans, you get 2 years of Spotify and a year of Daily Vice.
Yeah, so this is actually really interesting because, like, I just went through this process of, you know, anyone who's ever heard this podcast before, or, you know, been within 20 yards of me talking, has probably heard me say that I was gonna, you know, probably ride and die with my 2011 Rogers plan until, you know, the Ice Age, like the next apocalypse, just because it was never going to get any better in terms of pricing for the specific things that I wanted. And then the reality hit where that the stuff, I needed more stuff. I needed some sort of nationwide calling that was not tied into evenings and weekends, so that I could effectively be a managing editor of a website and not pay $150 in overages every month.
Which is technically legal now with the wireless code, but
no, it wasn't, because the wireless code only applied to contracts after the wireless code changed, so they were still dinging me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. What am I saying? Also, you can go over the $50 domestic overage as long as you opt into that. So carry on.
So I think the thing here is just with this idea is that with modern contracts, I think the mentality might be one to look for what is the cheapest, most basic plan that you can get, like the most stripped down, old school style plan, or evaluate the stuff, the little trappings that are out there, and see which stuff plan might actually fit kind of where you're at and what you want to do. Like, are you the type of person that might actually really want 2 free years of Show Me, or things like that? Like, is there, the thing that made me change was, like, I just needed actually a better phone, rates, or a better phone category to my plan, and that finally pushed me over.
So what's interesting? I also did this switch recently to
real talk.
Yeah, to a Share Everything plan, and it was because I'm So a lot of people are going to tell me, "Oh, you should just get a local SIM," and I do. But Share Everything comes with Roam Like Home, and for all of Roger's faults, Roam Like Home is one of the most brilliant, not only marketing plays that they've made in recent years, but one of the most brilliant tie-ins of any carrier in recent years. You pay $5 a day in the US to access your unlimited calling, texting, and whatever data pool you have associated with your account. For me, I signed up for a 6 gig plan, which is what I had before. And what I was doing was I was finding that I had to go between two devices. I had to use their 50 megabyte, $7.50 data plan while I was in the States with my regular number. But because it didn't have any included voice or text, I didn't want to text anybody while I was in the States or make any phone calls. And I would use a Roam Mobility number, but the service in areas where I go, like New York or San Francisco, was just lower than it was on AT&T. So that was one area. The other was that when I'm in the States, I want to be accessible the same way I am here.
Yeah, because oftentimes you're there to do your job, right? Like you need to almost be more accessible, right? Like
yeah,
we're not like going down to Mexico for like a 4-day weekend or something, or like there's no enjoyment here when we travel. It's just more stress stacked upon life.
Yeah, this job doesn't allow for any Mexican vacations. But what it does allow for is sort of an evaluation of what works for us. And I've quickly realized that as an editor of a site, I have to be accessible to everybody who works for me. Is that Ronnie?
Yeah. So
explain what's happening right now, because people may not be watching.
Let's take a step back for a moment. I pod from home. We home pod because, as listeners know, we can't figure out a live pod audio setup because we just don't have the gear. Yesterday, the building next to mine kind of caught fire and burned, and it was a terrible scenario, which required me to, being the life-saving guy that I am, toss my cats into a carrying case and prepare to vacate my building should it also happen to catch on fire. That has created a household scenario where everyone hates each other. So Ronnie and Chester, normally very chill bro cats, are kind of going through a weird scenario right now while we're trying to pod.
Okay. All right. Well, if you need to go off and administer to some lithium to some cats, just let me know. I'll take over.
They know we're recording. They're doing this for sure.
Okay, they just want attention.
They want to get paid scale.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, if they unionize, then we just we'll just take measures.
And they're upset that you travel so much, Daniel.
Yeah, I know. I'm upset I travel so much. So what this did was it forced me into, okay, I was paying way too much in roaming fees. Roam Like Home made more sense than something like Roam Mobility, which I also use as a secondary source of data. But because Roam Mobility gives you a US number, it was only really useful calling other US numbers. Mm-hmm. I couldn't give that number to my friends and family and ask them to call me because many of them don't have US calling.
Well, but just even that idea of like, before you go broadcasting out the number change, or also depending on certain apps like WhatsApp that are tied to phone number, making those switches. Like that's always been, like, I think the data thing that you're saying is compelling, but there's also just the simplicity and the ease of, like, you just text Rogers and you say like, hey, let's do this. I'm flying to New York City, and then it's just on, right?
Well, no, you don't even text them. You opt in once, and whenever you go down there, you just get.
Oh, so it auto knows that you're there and just says enabled.
Bloop. Well, yeah, I mean, once you sign up for a Share Everything plan, the first time you go down to the States, you have to opt in by sending a text message.
Okay.
And then every other time, I believe it subscribes every 6 months, so it'll ask you the next time you go after a 6-month period, hey, do you want to keep using Roam Like Home? And you text them back and you say yeah or no, and then
Okay,
you
cool. I
carry
thought
them.
every time that you went down, you had to text enable it, but that's even
No.
more simplistic then.
Yeah, and I mean $5 a day. Um, it really, like, while I was there, it made so much sense. You know, I was able to tether, I was able to do everything I would otherwise do here. And AT&T, I mean, for all of its faults, actually has a far stronger network than T-Mobile. And in areas like in parts of New York where T-Mobile's network is actually stronger, it will switch over to T-Mobile. So I found myself using, you know, a phone that had two very strong networks, whereas as far as I know, RoamMobility does not offer AT&T LTE roaming yet in the States. It only offers T-Mobile LTE,
Yeah.
which works in some areas, but most likely will not be as strong as AT&T in parts of the country. So yeah, I mean, I made the switch, and it's super simple. It is a bit more expensive, but this sort of transitions into the second part of the argument, which is unlocked phones, right? So if you bring your own phone to a plan today on Rogers, Bell, and Telus, you get $20 off, right? On Fido, Kudo, and Virgin, you get $15 off. And what that allows you to do is say, okay, well, are there any phones that cost less than on the flanker brands $360, which is the amount that you save over 2 years, or on the bigger brands $480? Are there phones that cost less? Yes, I'll buy those, and then I'll bring them over and I'll save a bit of money that way.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people have also been talking about whether that's a good idea. Are there any unlocked phones that cost less than $350 that actually makes sense to buy over, you know, an iPhone or a Galaxy on contract? Now, you've had this experience before because you've had phones that have broken, where, you know, you've had to go to an unlocked phone and sort of maneuver that way.
Well, then not even just like, so I was also operating a multi-plan situation, so I was getting trying to like always play the new contract for a phone, or bring a phone into a scenario where I wasn't forced to update a contract. Like, hey, I got this new phone, because a lot of the times if you can secure the unlocked phone, the carrier and the SIM works, the carrier doesn't really know what's going on, right? Like the more that you can do yourselves without having to call in, the better off you are. But so that's a good thing. Like you know, we've talked before about what is the mental process of choosing kind of where you want to be, and is it carrier first, is it phone first, is it plan and needs? And I think right now there's this the scenario is that there's a few options for people depending upon how they want to go through it. Like, it's not just like, well, you need to choose your carrier first because they're going to dictate everything. There's enough going on that you can, if you want to put the energy and effort into it, kind of finagle your own best case scenario.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. How do people buy phones today, right? Do you go to, I mean, especially in a Canadian market where exclusives are dwindling, right? So you only have a few devices that are on only one or only two carriers. I mean, I can think of maybe 3 or 4, like the Moto X was a TELUS exclusive for a while until it came to Fido, and I believe Wind and SaskTel or MTS. I may be forgetting, but for a while it was just on TELUS, and the first gen version was on Rogers exclusively until it came to Fido. For there was the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact, which I think is a great phone. That was an exclusive to Bell. But those are very uncommon these days. I mean, the biggest devices like the iPhone, the Galaxy S6, the HTC One M9, those all come to every carrier, right? And then you have devices like the Asus Zenfone 2, the Alcatel One Touch Idol 3 that's coming later this summer, and the Moto G and Moto E that are sold unlocked at retailers like Staples or NCIX or Canada Computers. And those are really great phones that cost often under $300, sometimes under $200. And as long as you know the virtues and deficiencies of these devices, you can kind of get away with buying one.
Yes, it's the expectation game. It's not the where I think most times people kind of go into this with like, well, if I'm going to sign up for a 3-year contract, I better be getting the best possible phone I can, or like how does this kind of relate? Whereas now it's like, yeah, you can get like an amazing kind of like mid-tier, I wouldn't say specialty phone, but maybe a phone with its own unique strengths at a really great price point.
Well, I think more, yeah, like that's absolutely right. Like the quality of low cost phones has improved over the last couple of years, but moreover, there's been a push by the carriers to separate, and I think this is due to the fact that they have to at some point acknowledge that phones are actually expensive. A lot of the time they hid the cost of the phone in the plan. For a 3-year contract, you can do that because it amortizes over 36 months.
Yeah.
But now that you only have 24 months to get to $0, the carriers have to face the music and say, okay, we're no longer actually subsidizing the phone. I mean, on Rogers, Bell, and Telus, they are to some extent subsidizing it. But for their flanker brands, they're not even doing that anymore. Yeah. They're financing it. They're basically saying, okay, you buy the phone. It's a $700 phone. We will finance $360 of it, but not to give you as a gift, but will actually allow you to pay that over 24 months in equal installments. So if you're buying a $700 phone, you only spend whatever, $240 or $300, whatever the fucking math is. Sorry, and and then you pay off $15 a month over 24 months, and that pays back the cost of the phone. That's it. That's all you really have to feel. That's all you really have to figure out these days. And it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot simpler. But on the other hand, you're paying a lot more for your phone up front as a result.
Yeah, but so that expectation though, like, wasn't just like, oh, there's no way we can make this money back in the 2-year contract format. We have to change this up. It was also the reason why people hated carriers so much when there was 3-year contracts is because what they were paying for and what they were getting were so hidden that they felt that they were really getting gouged. Those cancellation fees that you're talking about, that the kind of like cancellation shock rather than sticker shock, I think has led to, people are kind of aware of how much an iPhone actually costs now, which I think is good for carrier perception and churn, because it's not like they're being blamed for the business of how this stuff kind of works.
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting point. I have a lot of issues with how data charges scale, but that's separate. So I'll get to that in a second. But you're right in the sense that the transparency around around plan and phone pricing has led to a more educated customer base. Right? So when they approach an iPhone 6 and they say, well, it costs $350 on a 2-year contract, why does it cost so much? Then, the CSR at Rogers, Bell, or Telus is like, well, because it's a $950 phone, or if an $850 phone, and we're giving you $500 off, which you're paying off over 2 years.
Yeah. Well, and having Apple sell the phones direct totally changes it, because you can't hide the cost in that scenario, right?
Yeah, but also the carriers have integrated a bring your own device strategy into their marketing.
Yep.
So unlike 3-4 years ago where you never heard about unlocked phones, today they're encouraging you to bring your unlocked phone thanks to the success of devices like the Nexus 4, the Nexus 5, the OnePlus One, the Moto G. All of these devices have alternative distribution models where you can buy them easily and call up your carrier and say, yo, carrier, I have a phone now. What can you do for me?
Yeah.
And like, well, I can actually give you $20 off every month.
Yeah, and they're happy to do that because I think what people need to further that education. Carriers aren't in the phone selling business. They hate that part. They're in the phone plan business. Like, if they didn't have to deal with the inventory of selling phones, they would gladly not do that. so for them, this just really saves hassle, and they can focus on doing what they actually want to do and what they're built for, which is providing service and charging for it and profiting from that. Everything else is just a kind of a requirement for that to happen.
Yeah,
necessary hassle.
I mean, that's a really good point, because a lot of people accuse the carriers of overcharging for the phones themselves, but the carriers, if you actually delve into their quarterly earnings reports, they say that they make no money from the hardware, like nothing. They make revenue from the hardware, but in many cases they lose money because they're paying so much upfront for these products, especially as Samsung and Apple make up a higher percentage of their sales. And those flagship devices, they have very low margins because Samsung and Apple say, you want the phone? We're going to charge you whatever the hell we want for it, especially Apple. They say, we'll charge you whatever we want, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And if you want, then you can increase prices on the plans.
Or, other examples where it's like, because Apple has it just kind of like one tier of phone. It's like the premier tier of various ages. But when you look at some of the other carriers where we're like, well, if you want our really good phone that your customers actually want, you're also going to have to buy our other phones, which you're probably not going to sell unless you get really inventive with deals or incentives to your sales teams. So they push that device. Like, it's a lot of, we're stuck with this inventory. What do we do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of the times the carriers will be able to sell it back to the OEM if it doesn't sell. But the proviso is that you want to stock our flagship, you have to stock our mid-range and 2 of our low ends, and we're going to give you sales targets. We'll help you with the marketing. But if you don't reach those sales targets, then we're going to have to renegotiate our deals next time. And that leads to a lot of
pink phones.
Customer service representatives going, hey, like, I know you're looking at the Galaxy S6, but you want a $0 phone, or you want a Galaxy that doesn't cost you anything? I've got a piece of crap to show you. Yeah. And they push those like Galaxy Ace.
Are you
Galaxy...
active?
Yeah, it's like, do you ever move? Yeah. Well, this phone has a GPS and an accelerometer. So, if I'm just looking at Kudo's phone lineup, and they have things like the HTC One M9, that costs $400, right? Like, that is a phone up front. You have to pay $400. The Galaxy S6, $400. Whereas devices like the Nexus 5, the Moto E, the Galaxy S3, which they're still selling 3 years later, is $0, right? So these are phones that probably still sell very well for the carrier. And guys like us are like, why are you buying a Galaxy S3? But in many cases, a $0 GS3 is a better deal than a piece of crap HTC Desire 620 or 320 that was released last year, but is under-spec'd, will never be updated to the latest version of Android.
Definitely.
And is basically just a throwaway device from an OEM that is really bundling that product with their flagship.
Yeah, like for example, for the past 2 weeks, week and a bit, I've been using the One M8 because just recently the Lollipop update came out for it. Just got that thing pushed just earlier this week, actually. It is lovely. It is significantly improved. Not only like it's desensing the phone, right? So like the less sense there, the better. But just the actual like functionality improvements and like speed, like the touchscreen responsiveness and things like that are so improved. Like, so if you can have, last year's or the years before flagship, which is going to get the optimizations and improvements to keep going, that's way better than being stuck into a phone that could never really compete on that performance level in the first place just for like $40 off. And I think, last year around Christmas time, as we were doing a lot of like our end of the year reviews and roundups on the Syrup, that was a constant conversation we were having, like comparing this phone, which had only ever intended to have a ceiling this high but had this price, and the older version of last year's flagship, which was here but maybe slightly slower. It's that constant balancing act of you're not comparing. It's not a phone head to head. It's like a this phone versus the field kind of scenario.
Right. For sure. So I mean, coming full circle, I think that's something to look at when you're buying a phone now. Is that your carriers, if you're on a 3-year contract, has already likely reached out to you and said, hey, if you want to, we reported a couple of weeks ago that Rogers was texting some of their longtime customers and saying, hey, we'll give you a free gigabyte every month to your existing plan for the next 12 months. And that was done as a way to entice people not to leave because, hey, you have an open field. You can go and look at other plans. But if you're getting a free gig on your every month on your plan, then you're more likely to stay as a month-to-month customer until they can get you on a 2-year contract again.
Yeah. Sometimes that gig makes all the difference. I know having that extra gig would have probably saved me, let's say $300 in the past 6 months.
Yeah, I'm actually like, so I used 7.5 gigs last month. And I think Rogers charges, I want to say, how much is it? $250? No, $15 per gigabyte. So I paid $22.50 in overages. Like that's a lot of money. That's how much they charge. Yeah, I mean that's not cheap. So if you're really going to be using a lot of data, you might as well invest in a higher data plan. Now that's another issue that I have, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. The carriers are very good at leading you towards a certain plan. But when you're looking at a Rogers Share Everything plan, for example, the 1 gigabyte plan or the 500 megabyte plan, let's start with that, is $80 a month. So it's $60 a month for an unlimited calling, texting plan, plus $20 for 500 megs.
Yep.
Doubling the data costs $5 more. It's $85. Doubling that costs $5 more to 2 gigabytes. So when you're comparing an $80 500 meg plan to a $90 2 gig plan, I mean, what is the incentive to spend $80, right? Well, they're really pushing you towards that deal.
I think they are definitely trying to slide you in towards their kind of optimal positioning. But there are also, the extra benefit there is that there are people that are just like, I can't go beyond this monthly price. So
for sure,
if you don't, you get digged. There are people like, I would like your cheapest plan, just cheapest. I want to pay the least amount of money, and they're like, okay, and that's great for us because you're getting the least amount of value for it.
But what they're really doing is they're saying our unlimited plans, because they call them unlimited plans. Our unlimited plans start at $80. That is their big ticket marketing package right there. They're allowed to say, even though most of their customers will probably go with the $90 plan, TELUS did this with their $70. They lowered the entry level of their lowest price because they wanted to say our share plans start at $70 a month. But that only gave them 200 or 300 megabytes of data and 300 minutes.
Didn't they eventually remove that? Like slowly?
No, Rogers. So it was weird. Rogers added a $70 tier that had 250 megs and unlimited calling and texting, but then they canceled that because people were upset that 250 megs was too little.
Yeah, because update the apps on your phone once in a month, and that's your data. Like,
right.
That's Candy Crush. That's like Candy Crush.
Yeah, I mean it's little punitive. I agree. So TELUS now has the $70 plan where you can get a premium smartphone plus unlimited calling, 300 minutes per month of local daytime minutes, and then 300 megs for $70, which is really very little. But $5 more gets you 750 megs. $5 more than that gets you 1.5 gigs. So I mean, clearly these carriers are pushing you towards a certain price tier. But that's the reality that many Canadians face right now, is that they had, arguably cheaper plans that were, had disparate portions. Like you would pay $25 for, 200 minutes, and then you would buy a value pack that gave you, 2,500 text messages and 10 voicemails and call display and call waiting, and then you would buy a data add-on on top of that, right? And when you canceled, you would have to cancel your voice and data separately, and you'd be charged early cancellation fees separately for those two things.
Yeah, and now we have unlimited plans that are unlimited in every way other than the thing that people actually want, which is the data.
Yeah, so we're,
or not. It's not necessarily actually want, because I'm one of those people now that needs unlimited phone calling. But in terms of like the day-to-day need, it's data, man. Data's the thing.
So a lot of the the flanker brands, Kudo, Fido, and Virgin, have launched pretty good. I said compelling because compared to what's offered on the bigger brands, they are compelling. Unlimited plans if you bring your own device. There's a $45 1 gigabyte plan. There is a $55 2 gigabyte plan and a $65 3 gigabyte plan. Now, $65 for unlimited Canada-wide minutes, unlimited texts and call display voicemail, and 3 gigs of data doesn't seem like a great deal, but in today's market, it is a pretty fantastic deal, especially if you do bring your own phone and you have a good one, like the OnePlus One or the Asus Zenfone 2.
Yeah, it's again, it's always in that context of like in today's market. But actually, one thing that we didn't talk about, I don't know if you want to get into this or just keep moving on, talk about some of the things you've seen in the past 2 weeks. Now that you're on that the share everything plan, I know your lovely fiance walked into the screen about 20 minutes ago. Shout outs, fiance. Are you comboing up? Are you Voltroning together to enhance your savings, or are you solo?
Not yet. Because I don't know. First of all, we're on 2 different carriers right now, and we've talked about going over to one or the other. I still think that Rogers has a slight edge when it comes to network performance in Toronto. That's diminishing because Bell has really invested quite heavily in its 700 megahertz spectrum. But
yeah, and everyone go read Daniel's crazy in-depth piece on that process if you haven't yet. If you want to learn anything about how information hits your phone from the ether.
Yeah, it's very cool, and Bell's done a great job. And I mean, Bell and TELUS are practically one network, so you're comparing Bell and TELUS to Rogers. So the other thing to take away is that Rogers still has the most spectrum, but it's not necessarily the best carrier for every part of Canada anymore. PC Mag did a cross Canada performance test last year, and they determined that Bell actually is the best carrier in Canada because it has better upload speeds in most parts of the country, and it also has lower latency in most parts of the country, whereas Rogers mostly emphasizes their download speeds, which don't really affect you that much in day-to-day work, in day-to-day use, because everything on mobile is so compressed and in smaller chunks that you don't need sustained 200 gigabit or 200 megabit speeds in most parts of the country. It's mostly more marketing. But anyway, I mean, you're not going to have a bad network experience on any Canadian carrier, pretty much.
It's really, are you an Argos fan? Because if you are, you know what carrier to choose.
Update me. I'm not an Argos fan, so
what happened? MLSE bought the Argos, but only the Bell part of MLSE. Which is so weird. Also, apparently, the Leafs have a new coach. There's a lot of sportsing you've been missing.
No, I know about the Babcock signing. I'm very familiar with the. I mean, I've mostly just been like inhaling amazing basketball. Like, you and I have not talked about basketball in way too long.
Yeah,
we could have our own basketball podcast, but
yeah, sports has been sportsing.
Oh, so good. Stephen Curry is, and I mean, like, James Harden must be going to sleep at night, just crying at how close everything he's getting.
Crying into his beard. But that being said, okay, we're filming this on a Saturday. You know, they've lost their first 2 away games. It really, when you play your home playoff games, that's what it matters. Because if they win their 2 at home, series is tied. But
fair enough, right? Like Golden State has not. They lost like 3 home games all season, or 2 home games and like 1 playoff game all season. I think the Cleveland series is going to be a sweep. I just don't see Atlanta stepping up.
They have like no players right now. They're all injured or dead or arrested or leg broken.
Well, so does Cleveland. They have no players either,
except for that guy named LeBron.
Right. I mean, like the fact that Kyrie Irving did not play last night, and they still like soundly beat Atlanta is proof enough that you basically just need LeBron to win a game. But I don't know. I mean, not a single Atlanta player got higher than 15 points. That's kind of sad to me. Anyway, we digress.
That brief sports segment brought to you by Bell.
Yeah, sort of indirectly by Bell. So let's talk about what's coming up. 2 big developer conferences in the next couple of weeks. Thursday, Friday next week is Google I/O. Then 2 weeks after that is Worldwide Developer Conference, which will feature Apple's new iOS 9 and OS X, I guess, 10.11, named after another beautiful part of California. iOS 9, let's start there.
Tar pits.
iOS 9 is Mark Gurman's been like giving the hot leaks of what's happening with the Apple. What? Oh, you just muted.
Oh. Mark Hot Leaks Gurman? Is that his
Hot Leaks
nickname?
Gurman is probably not the name he wants to associate himself with. Yeah, dude's been on fire recently, but basically what's being surmised is that iOS 9 is not going to be heavy on new features. It's mostly going to be heavy on stability and performance improvements, especially for devices that are aging on the A5 chip. That includes the iPad mini, the original, the iPad 2, which is like 3 years old now.
iPhone 5?
No, it's 4 years old. And the iPhone 5, which is getting up there, it's 3 years old, but it's still, a decent device. So the big takeaway here is that Apple is no longer going to be building a single version of iOS and then chopping off features that don't work for the chips that are getting up there in age, like the A5 and the A6. What they're doing is they're building separate builds, separate versions of iOS specifically tailored to the older devices.
Yeah, they're acting like a responsible technology company.
Right, exactly. And what that means is that devices like the iPhone 4S, the iPhone 5, the iPad 2, the iPad mini are not going to stutter and die with the newer versions of iOS like previous years. We don't know for sure, but that's a huge step in the right direction, especially since Apple seems to be the only company really investing in its older platform, its older hardware. Samsung, HTC, Samsung's been doing a fantastic job keeping their devices up to date. HTC as well, but it's sporadic. You never know what a device is going to, how a device is going to perform when it comes to their older device.
Yeah, well, there's 2 things here. There's phones that get updated to newer versions of software and cramming that to make it work, and actually having different branches or builds specifically designed to run on older hardware at a high performance level.
Right.
I think the latter approach is the more significant one, because we live in a culture right now where everyone expects to replace their technology every 3 years at the outer edges. And when I was just thinking the other day of can't remember what it was, but just like the idea of that every tool that we use has to be replaced, whereas like a radio, like just a transistor radio, just it does a thing and it will continue to do that thing until it breaks, right?
Right.
Whereas we are in this world of like phones which do the same thing over and over but with more or less capacity that have to be constantly replaced. And I think that's just not sustainable globally, especially as, 2 billion more people in the next 5 years are going to be kind of onboarded to mobile tech and smartphones, like we need a plan for that.
And in many ways, a lot of the recycling efforts undertaken in developed countries end up going towards those developing nations. So you have there's sort of a bifurcation between a company from like China and India that develop homegrown smartphones for their particular country's needs, and then there's a lot of reselling of older devices for those developing markets. But they're all resource intensive. All of those undertakings are extremely resource intensive.
Well, also part of this is like, as OS platforms gave up control of all the applications and services that it provide to like the third-party network, as app stores became a thing, it's no longer something that Google or an Apple can control to have people like Facebook and Twitter and all the third-party makers actually not only work on supporting older versions, but making low-end versions of their services work on older phones, where nowadays it's simply a matter of like they just cut it off. They just force you to update to this, and if you can't update to that, you can no longer use it. Where you see people with older iPhones have adopted this process of, I just never update iOS, because if I never update iOS, I can never update any of my apps, but the versions that I have are still forced to work because they're running, and unless they like kind of push me to update, I can stay in this experience that the developers are just like, we just don't want to support this anymore. We don't want to support this anymore. We cut it off. So I think that has to be a cofactor for this stuff to be useful. But I'm glad that Apple's taking time to, now that they have 3 major tech platforms to clean up the underwire and the structure, because they're going to all need to have to start working together better.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge topic, a serious. I mean that could be a topic for its own podcast. What I'm getting from that though is there are several sort of platform layers that we have to deal with, right? Like Apple has its underlying OS layer, and then companies like Facebook that develop apps that almost every single user downloads. Mm-hmm. They have to choose, okay, are we developing apps? Are we developing a single app that can run on every supported version, or are we developing a separate version for each OS, right? Because Apple doesn't allow you to specify a phone or tablet version that is supported on its app store. So you can't say this app only works with the iPhone 5 and up. Mm-hmm. What they do is they only have it supported with the certain OS version. So they'll say this app is designed to work with iOS 8 or iOS 7 or iOS 6.
And so that has been an amazing benefit to developers, just in the idea when you talk about development fragmentation. It's something you see, as much as I've been enjoying the updated Lollipop 1M8, the Android apps are still a little hit or miss, where it's just like, this just feels like it's not built for this phone,
Well, it's because it's built for every phone.
Yeah. So the benefit that iOS developers have always had is they know exactly the feature set and the APIs that they can build for, can target that, and if your older phone that updated to that version of the OS gives you a crappy experience, they know that you are probably gonna buy just a newer iPhone. That's that force push to get you to update. So it's like it makes it easier for developers. We've gotten better iOS app experiences at the high end, but then at the low end, if you're just like, oh man, I just got this 4S or this 5 for $0, and why is it so slow? Why is it crashing all of a sudden? It's like, well, because it really couldn't run that OS version, and it definitely can't run those apps that are baseline for that OS, but really need this year's model for the processing.
Right. So, I mean, what's interesting is I'm looking at davidsmith.org, and he has an updated tally of iOS versions. He makes a bunch of popular free apps for the iPhone and iPad. And what he's seeing as of yesterday, or as of today, is 76.1% of iPhones are running iOS 8. Okay, so that's the latest version. 21.1% are running iOS 7. Only 2.6% are running 6 and below. So what that tells me is that Apple has basically allowed developers to cut off older versions of iOS fairly safely. And many popular apps like Overcast, Marco Arment's podcast app, only support iOS 8. Many larger companies like Facebook can't afford to cut off people running just the latest version of iOS, but they can make it a better experience on the latest version of iOS. So whereas on Android, you have a completely different experience where the updated version of Lollipop is only running on like 10% of devices. So even though, you know, the last 3 or 4 versions of Android make up a majority of users, it's still not possible to target the latest version of Android specifically.
Yeah, or you know, and to have a benefit. And this is again like everything stems from the operational structure and the mindset of the kind of founding partners for these platforms, right? Apple creates these very strong, specific limitations or parameters, and then from that, the simplicity creates opportunities.
Right.
You know, Google and Android being kind of not necessarily open in the sense of being like an uncontrolled platform, but in allowing so many multiple parameters and participants creates a wonderful rainbow of specific opportunities, but no real common experience.
Well, I mean, so I would have said that's true 2 years ago. But what material design has allowed developers to do is create a baseline aesthetic for its apps and then build features that feel or work best on certain versions. So I'm looking at the Android Developer Console right now. Jelly Bean makes up about 40% of Android total. KitKat makes up 40% total, and Lollipop makes up about 10%. And the rest are Gingerbread and Ice Cream Sandwich, which make up just about 10% as well. Yeah. So we have a situation here where it's fairly safe to cut off Gingerbread. You can target just Ice Cream Sandwich and above. It's still very safe to target Jelly Bean and above because you're still looking at 90% of the accessible market here. Right, so 90%. That's higher than iOS 8, right? And even though there are thousands of new APIs available to KitKat and Lollipop, the experience on Jelly Bean and above is still fairly robust because Google's done a good job at being able to update Google Play services behind the scenes and push out new features without making manufacturers update the underlying OS version.
Yeah, so it's not you're getting the plumbing. The plumbing works even if the OS is still doing the same thing.
But I mean, that being said, I take my Nexus 6, out every couple of weeks just to see what's going on with the latest version of Android, and Android 5.1.1 or Android 5.1 on the Nexus 6 is like astonishingly faster than anything else out there. Like it is so much better an experience than even Android 5.1 on the LG G4 or Android 5.0.2 on the Galaxy S6. Arguably much faster phones internally. No. But Nexus just feels like a more cohesive experience.
Well, it's because it has that. It is the in a world of kind of like floating point options. It is that flagship scenario, right? So what I was saying before, and I know I'm painting in broad brushstrokes, and with material design, some things have changed, but it's only changed for still that certain segment, not across the board. So you still
Right.
the Android experience still isn't the Nexus experience. It is all those experiences. So you have this scenario where it's like, okay, it really sucks that my iPhone 4S or my 5, like, it just can't play with the wonderful iPhone experience the new iPhones have. But the counterpoint to that is like, Android really 5.1.1 works great on this phone. It's like you're targeting into point releases for a phone made by the platform operator versus, you know, any OEM, all of their devices. And I don't say that as a criticism, but just as an awareness of how, like, I remember you asked me, like, hey, check out, go back to the one I made, see what's going on with the updates. And the first update I downloaded, which I assumed was a Lollipop update, just because it was the most recent available, but I think it was actually a pre-update to prep for that.
Mm-hmm.
Downloaded, installed it, and was like, phew, this is still so sensy. I'm not really seeing much of anything. And then a few days later, the actual Lollipop update came down, and it was like you could feel the good Google pushing through.
Yeah.
Like, just even like, oh, stacks, cards, notifications are not terrible. Look at this. I can touch the screen and it knows that I'm pointing there. It's amazing how, you know, you're talking about that fluidity and speed. Like, those make real differences in your overall perception of a phone.
Android has become a lot better to use. Unequivocally. I really, whenever I go back to Android and use it for a long time, I'm like, this is a great experience for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But then I feel like I'm missing something, and I quickly realize that it's the apps. It's not the OS. It's the fact that the equivalent apps on Android don't feel as polished. They don't get updated as frequently. They don't have those, many of them don't have the same features as the iOS versions. And I tangibly feel like I'm missing something useful.
I don't think his features, I shouldn't say that. I don't notice a feature gap as much. It just feels junkier. Like, that's, you know, we're failing as, you know, tech journalists in not describing that, but like legitimately, just even using, like, even just Twitter and Facebook, just two examples of, like, in Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, let's say, most common apps that everyone use. I'm like, is this what the Android experience is for, like, the pinnacle apps, where it's just like, this doesn't feel it's just not as exciting or not as fluid, or like, why is this still loading? With the navigation is weird. Like, why do I have to go, you know, why do I have to breadcrumb my way back to get to switch accounts, things like that? Like, this just isn't. It's just simpler on iOS. It's simpler, and I think that if you were to talk to any of those platforms about, or the developers about, which app they would demonstrate as, like, this is the closest version to our idea of how we want our service to work, I'm assuming that they would more likely than not choose the iOS version. That being said, there's so many things happening on Android at the OS level, at, like, the system level in terms of the controls, that I just love. Just the way that the notifications stack in some ways, that I can pull down to grab the more detail. I can, like, hold on the notifications to, like, change my notification settings from that screen, to not go into, like, all the things that Apple doesn't care about in terms of, like, its platform settings, because they're just like, this is how it's going to be. This is what it is. Just don't change it. I really enjoy as I get to know that more. But so we talked about new version of iOS and how it's going to be kind of like cleanup optimization work, probably setting up a lot of, like, cross scaffolding stuff for, like, say, iOS 10 to really, like, integrate. Android M, what, you know, other than, like, being a where Magneto and his mutants hang out on Android M. What do you expect this to be? Because we're reaching this point where we're hitting the wall of the current generation of what mobile can do, and we need to start getting into the future generation, which is the multiple mobile touch points working together. Like we need the big data, we need the machine learning, OSs can't just be app launchers anymore. They have to be smarter than that.
Yeah.
So how does that play out?
Well, let's talk about the future. Let's go back to 2014. Let's look at what Android L insert sound effects here. If we had a producer. So let's look at Android L. So for the first time in Android's history, they launched a public beta of a new version, complete with a brand new aesthetic. It introduced material design, biggest refresh of Android since ever, I guess. Yeah. They introduced Android Auto, Android TV, both of which have not really done a whole lot, but have existed as standalone versions fairly successfully. They made it easy to create with material design and with the new Android SDK apps that scale properly to every screen size. They made it easy to create Android Wear apps. They debuted 3 watches. The Moto 360 came later, but they debuted the Gear S, the Gear Live and the LG G Watch. Android Wear has come a long way in the last year. It recently just got an update to 5.1.1 that we'll take a big look at in a review in an upcoming segment. So they did a lot, and they've done a lot since. But Android L Lollipop as a standalone version has sort of not been that stable. I want to say not been that reliable. It's been very buggy. It bit off a little bit more than it could chew, and I think it was true of iOS 8 as well. But I think M is going to be a cleaning up of Android L, and it'll be one of those releases that focuses on the enterprise. There's going to be a huge business focus this year as Android tries to take on iOS and BlackBerry from a security perspective. But I think there are going to be very tangible improvements, like what they did with Android 4.3. They added a Bluetooth low energy stack to make it really easy for accessory manufacturers to add like Jawbone and stuff to add really reliable Bluetooth functionality. They'll do the same for fingerprints with a new underlying fingerprint sensor API. They're going to make more improvements to the camera, I hope. And overall, I just think that they're going to clean up a lot of the cruft left over from Android L.
Okay, so then what you're saying is for both of the major phone platforms, it's probably a really good time to hold on to this year's model or last year's model of phone, because it is unlikely that a new phone is going to be coming with, like, you're not going to need a new phone to run the new features. Their current phone's going to get a lot nicer to use.
Yeah, I mean, this is the reality of smartphone platforms right now anyway, is that they've reached a plateau of, in many ways, of new features. They're going to be rolling out things slower as it matures. And I mean, we've heard that Android is going to debut on an Internet of Things operating system. So I think, as it has for many years, Android is going to be less about the smartphone screen and more about the every screen everywhere else in your life, because Android is already pretty good on your smartphone.
Yeah. And Google just considers smartphones to really be another screen.
Yeah, I mean, they have to, right? So we're going to try to get a podcast up next week from the show floor at Moscone Center in San Francisco. Not sure how well it's going to go, considering the internet there is usually fairly unreliable, but we'll figure it out.
We should just write down our thoughts on pieces of paper, take photos of them, and then make like a keynote presentation to just play and upload that.
Yeah, it's been done. It's been done. I've seen pretty good ones of that. We'll make stop motion.
We'll send our ravens, yeah.
Stop motion podcast. Well, I think that's it for this week. Let's get out there and enjoy our Saturday, why don't we? Nothing.
I'm literally going right into a spreadsheet after this.
Oh, amazing. Okay, well, yeah. I'm not.
Yeah, if you survive Google I/O and I survive BetaKit's own IPO, then maybe we can get together and pod again.
Yeah, I may see you again this year. Yeah. I may. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure having you. As always, my name is Daniel Bader, at JourneyDan on Twitter, plus Daniel Bader on Google+, I think. Where can people find you, Douglas?
@Tron, and betakit.com. When you're loving this podcast and reviewing it 5 stars on iTunes, or leaving a comment in the on the post, or maybe in the Mobile Syrup community, because that's the hot new thing that everyone's doing. My God. Yeah. Why don't you let us know what you want and are expecting from the major platform updates and developer conferences coming up? And do you want more hot sports takes? Because I swear we both have them.
Oh yeah. Well, I've it for sports. I don't know, but I'm also going to make a small shout out to a new podcast that I launched with Eric Lehman. You may have seen him on the Apple Watch focused SyrupCast a couple of weeks ago. We have launched an Apple podcast called Fresh Fruit. You can find that on iTunes and your local podcast listener. And that's it. It's a great podcast. It's going to be a weekly show focusing on Apple news, reviews, and hot takes, tips and tricks, everything else that you will love from a Canadian perspective. That will hopefully take some of the onus off SyrupCast to focus on Apple, because I know a lot of people don't love us talking about Apple entirely on this show.
All we talked about was Android today.
Well, no, I mean, we talked about everything, and I think that's kind of what people want from the SyrupCast. So if you're looking for a specific Apple-focused take, listen to Fresh Fruit with me and Eric Lehman. That's it for the show today. Thank you again, and we will see you next week.
Shout-outs.
Saskatchewan.
Ottawa.
None of it.
Yellowknife? I don't know. I didn't have a good one.